All right, everyone, welcome back. Today we're talking about SNL's 50th birthday party, celebrities that we never knew were actually funny, and that time Jeff got arrested for driving a fake cop car.
So Jeff, right now a lot in the media, I think you've probably seen, even though we're on the record that you stream and you don't have conventional television. Saturday Night Live, we mentioned on this show in passing, our specific references. Saturday Night Live is in its 50th season on television, and there's been a lot. There's been specials and documentaries and a musical special and all kinds of things like that, which essentially I think we can relate to, right? Because I think you could literally say that we grew up with this show. And so thinking, and it's been fun watching some of these things that they've shared and some of the old clips and some of the old bands and the sketches, which interesting part, here you go right away. Lorne Michaels, the creator of Saturday Night Live, always referred to them as sketches and not skits. And I don't know if that's ever come up in your comedy history as far as, I guess, because something that, paraphrasing, that Carol Burnett does skits. We do sketches. Anyway, really got me thinking about, again, yes, we've grown up with this. So I was kind of curious to talk about that process and growing up with it and when you discovered it and when it, what impact it had on you. I know it had an impact on me. You probably much more so as an actual living and breathing comedian. But take us back again. It was October technically of 1975, so we're not quite there for the 50 years. But your first exposure to Saturday night, which wasn't called Saturday Night Live until a little bit later, because there was actually a show on with Howard Cosell. And yes, there's a nice poll for you, called Saturday Night Live with Howard Cosell. And once that show got canceled, they plucked the live part. Saturday night. Go. What were your thoughts? What were your reactions? What did you think when you first saw that on the Rabbit Ears?
Nothing occurred to me at all. In fact, I didn't understand the context, the premise, or anything about it. Obviously, Chris, let's see, that was, you said 1975, right? So you and I would have been about 9 years old. I guess we would have been in about fourth grade or so. And, even at fourth grade, my bedtime would have been somewhere around 10 o'clock at night if I was really, kind of sneaking a couple extra minutes or so. But yeah, so it was a complete miracle that I was up at 11:30 and allowed to be up at 11:30. And the only reason that I happened to see the premiere episode as it aired was because, as I mentioned before, I have brothers that are 13 years and 16 years older than me. So that means, number one, that I was a happy surprise, Chris. That came a little bit later.
Well established.
I would like to say a surprise, a happy one. Let's call it that. Right. But only because I had these older brothers and they were all excited about it because they had heard, that it's going to have awesome comics and it's this new thing and they're doing the show live and there was some hype around it. Was I able to, and I think my parents might have been at a party that night or somewhere, weirdly.
Key party? Maybe not.
Yeah, definitely not my parents, but anything's possible, I guess, back in the 70s. But so there I was, way past my bedtime. Again, a lot of the jokes went over my head. I didn't quite get it. My brothers were laughing hysterically. They thought it was the greatest thing they had ever seen. And then following that, within the next 2 or 3 weeks, everyone was talking about it, right? Mostly people that were older than us, people that were at the very least in high school, college age, or even in their 30s or something. But it took about 4 or 5 episodes where I finally started to catch on and get it, and I was able to sneak up late at night and go downstairs to watch it. And yes, obviously following that, it had a huge impact. I mean, like immeasurable, right? Because for me, these guys that were performing were hitting my exact personality, my exact take on comedy, just kind of obscure, a little bit odd, off the cuff, and really, really kind of irreverent, right? And then oftentimes just kind of super silly and slapsticky. It all appealed to me, dude. It was the perfect formula. Back then, we didn't have this term exactly, but if it were now, that would be my algorithm, I guess.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I can't even begin, Chris, to explain all of the ways that Saturday Night Live and those skits and those performers, I guess, affected my personality over the years.
Sketches, not skets. Okay, I'm not going to tell Lorne Michaels on you.
Well, let's pause for a second there. Have you been able to define the difference between a skit and a sketch?
I haven't. I think it's, to be quite honest, it's probably just some pretentious bullshit. I think this probably in Lorne Michaels, or mine, probably just that his were, I think, more, everything that he wrote was, or that they wrote was more creative, more cerebral, right, more innovative. So that's why it's not Tim Conway and Harvey Korman, with their crazy hijinks with Carol Burnett. I don't know. I don't think you're in the grand scheme of things, there's probably no difference. Maybe it's length, or maybe it's tone, or maybe the fact, again, that it's coming from a different place. I'm just saying what Lauren says, and I say Lauren like we hang out together and play pickleball. Anyway, I can relate to a lot of that. I think probably the most similar experience, my older siblings were not, there was not quite as big a gap in our ages. However, there was enough of a gap that I had absolutely nothing in common with them. But they were big enough dorks, let's just say, that they were home on a Saturday night, even though they were teenagers at that time. Your brothers were older enough to the point where, but they should have been out doing something else. But instead, they had their dorky friends over, and it's very similar to you. I can remember kind of hanging back, being up because of hearing the commotion, and maybe in the kitchen and kind of watching what was going on. And maybe even when you're 9, like we were, that it was kind of dangerous and kind of cool, because then to go to school and to talk about it and to say, hey, there's this show called Saturday Night, and most people didn't know what you were talking about, but eventually they did. And I think to just sort of like, it's sort of, with me, it's like, wow, there's something that's a little bit different. There's something that's a little bit more creative. There's something that's a little more out there. And guess what? It's funny. And I think both of us as 9-year-olds appreciated something that made us laugh, or more importantly, appreciated something that we could, modify or appropriate or downright steal that can make other people laugh, right? And so I think that's where I'm coming from. I thought, this is kind of cool, and this was different, and this was something that I want more of, right? And then I think as the became, got some publicity, and everybody started talking about it, and there was newspaper articles or magazine articles, and then everybody kind of picked up on it. I think that's where, it became like, all right, now everybody's watching it, and everybody knows what I'm talking about. And then there are these bands. It's like, who are these bands, right? Because the bands that we saw at that point in time, what do we know from a band when we were 9 years old? Maybe you saw them thanks to Dick Clark, or maybe you heard them on AM radio, but it, again, provided another exposure to, like, who is that band? That was I think that's what they were shooting for, right? And so then you started the exposure to, the cast, whether it was John Belushi or Chevy Chase or Dan Aykroyd. We've talked about Steve Martin on this show. I would almost guarantee that's the first place I ever saw Steve Martin. And this guy in this white suit is pretty damn funny, and I think it helped shape me a little bit, you know what I mean? Because it was just like, hey, this is kind of, look at how it is to be funny and to have fun and to say ridiculous things, or to just have ridiculous sort of things pop up. When you see guys dressed as killer bees or something for no reason, with land sharks, all of that sort of thing, is just like, this is stupid and it's hilarious, right? And I think it's like, that's okay, right? Maybe there were those of us that needed that sort of validation in our lives, that stupid and hilarious is good.
No, absolutely, Chris. And it took a long time. It took about a month, I guess, for me to finally catch on. But then, like you and I experienced, right? We start hearing at school, right? Grade school, other kids talking about it, right? And then it became kind of the cool thing, right, Chris? Because if you were watching it and you knew the skits, that meant you were a cool kid that could stay up
Mm-hmm.
from, what was it, like 11:30 at night until 1 in the morning, for God's sake? I mean, am I wrong? Wasn't it like 90 minutes?
That was it. It was 90 minutes. Yeah.
By the way, I did not stay up until 1 a.m. I wasn't that cool, but yeah. And then you start to just really love these really unique ideas, right? Like Carol Burnett, for instance, I still don't get what the difference is between a skit and a sketch. But
Mm-hmm.
I guess I would say that those were traditional little skits. And to your point, Chris, these were really odd, very unique, very imaginative. Like you said, the Killer Bees, or
Mm-hmm.
the Samurai Chef, right? Or
Right.
just an episode where all
Right.
they're doing is going cheeseburger, 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 Coke, no Pepsi, right? And that doesn't seem like something Carol Burnett would have ever done, just because it's so left field. It's so odd. Well, frankly, Chris, I don't think the cast of Carol
No.
Burnett were doing a lot of cocaine, or smoking a lot of pot, or dropping acid. So I think, I guess that kind of helped. What do you think? I don't know.
Absolutely. And I think you had to look at the generation, like the people that were creating, people in the Carol Burnett show. And we don't mean to pick on Carol Burnett. Hey, she's still alive
I'm not picking on her at all.
and she's still great. No, I'm just saying, I'm just, for the record, we don't, yeah, she's still alive and kicking and had her own influences. But the people that were writing for the Carol Burnett show probably wrote for Sid Caesar in the 50s, right? Probably, maybe there was a few of them
Exactly.
that were like, oh, back in vaudeville when we were, doing the silent films with Laurel and Hart, they probably went back that far. So
Of
the
course.
inspiration and the information, and I think, and then they had a Saturday night family audience, where this was a Saturday night audience. I'm talking about Carol Burnett, but SNL, definitely not. This is 11:30. These are people that are in their 20s, right? So essentially they came of age, in the 60s, fueled by whatever kept them going. And so you're definitely going to get a different sensibility, and you're definitely going to get different outcomes. And I think, and you never would, and Ma and Pa, or Grandma and Grandpa, at watching the Carol Burnett show, are not going to literally, like, get the humor and get how subversive it is, and then get
No.
the chances they were taking. And I guess that was the cool part, right? Taking chances, which some comedians had been doing for a while, whether you go back to Lenny Bruce and George Carlin and Richard Pryor and all that sort of generation. But taking those chances, I don't think we'd ever seen those chances taken right in front of us on TV before.
No, and I did not get the joke at the time, because I guess my fourth or fifth grade self just didn't quite understand this yet. I wasn't that advanced sexually, I guess you could say. I remember one of my brothers doing a spit take, literally spitting out whatever they were drinking, Fanta or something, right? When Chevy Chase was doing the Weekend Update, and famously, right, the camera zooms in tonight on Weekend Update with your whatever host, Chevy Chase, and he's acting like he's on the phone with somebody else. And he says to the person on the other end, and I know you know this one, no, you don't actually blow on it. It's just an expression. Oh, hey, shoot, I gotta go. And he hangs up the phone.
Right.
And of course, I don't get it, but my brothers are like, holy shit. Now, that is not something that Harvey Korman would have said. But to Harvey Korman's credit, and of course, Tim Conway and Carol Burnett and Vicki Lawrence and all of them, right? Lyle Wagner. Ooh, look at me. I just did the whole cast.
Wow. Deep pulls there.
They definitely had that sense of humor. They were very hip. But yeah, to your point, you can't say that on prime time, right? This is the not ready for prime time players, in quotes, right?
Right.
And oh my God. And then when you had the other famous one, which you could have never said on regular primetime television, you had the awesome back and forth between Dan Aykroyd and
Jane, you ignorant slut.
Jane Curtin. Yeah. I mean, come on. That was so huge. I mean, they probably did put it on t-shirts. I don't know if you could have walked around in the 70s with that t-shirt, but
You couldn't now.
Jane, you ignorant slut was just repeated again and again and again. right? It just became part of our normal speech. It was almost like Keep on Truckin' or Wild and Crazy Guy,
Mm-hmm.
all that stuff, right?
Right. And I'm willing to bet that term had never been used on TV before. I'm willing to bet I'd never heard it before. But I think those were the things that definitely told us this is different, and this is but you know what, different is good. I mean, I think so many people think, if something's different, people don't like change, and not everything landed, but I think enough of them landed to the point where, man, you went back next week, and what were they going to say, and what were they going to do? And I think that's what you want when you're making a television show, and I think that's what you want when you're watching one, right? What am I going to see this week?
Yeah. And I think what really got me excited once I started catching on and learning about the cast members and start to get used to their different takes on how to approach comedy. Each one of them had a very defined persona, right? But what I think is so cool about that show, even in the first couple seasons, is the breakout characters of the female cast members, right? Where they were equally funny and effing hilarious, right? And of course, Gilda Radner, I mean, I guess it was a little bit different for me to suddenly be laughing just as hard at a female perspective on the joke as a guy. And that's only because in the completely male-dominated 70s, right, I don't know, I just didn't relate to or get a lot of access to it. But when Gilda Radner is doing Emily Litella and what's all this fuss about violins on television, or of course the incredible character Rosanna Dana, where she just goes completely into a different persona, and you can tell she's just channeling this thing in her brain that she's probably done many times in her childhood and privately, and now she has this worldwide audience to do it. I was, again, laughing so hard that my stomach hurt, right, watching Gilda Radner. Just her facial expressions. There was one fake commercial, right? You know how they do, of course, to
Mm-hmm.
this day, right? They do the
Right.
fake commercials. And that was something that we didn't expect, right?
No. No.
They cut away from the show and you think it's an actual commercial. And then you start to realize, oh, shit, the commercial's part of the show. You know, you could only fall for that a couple times. But one of them was a perfume.
Mm-hmm.
And the announcer is showing these beautiful women. I think it was Lorraine Newman and Jane Curtin, and they're out on dates and they have these elegant gowns. On her, it smells like lilacs. On her, it smells like roses, right? And then they show Gilda Radner and her mascara is running and she's drunk and she's like out in front of some nightclub and she's missing a shoe and she's trying to hail a cab. And the guy says, on her, it smells like 6 dead otters in a drain pipe.
Out of nowhere.
I don't know, it's just something you don't expect. And for some reason to this day, just that description caught me totally off guard. And it's just a great example of, getting this really left turn, didn't expect it, belly laugh from something that is super creative. And yeah, you're right. A lot of them didn't land, but we were so excited that I think we could forgive a lot of these sketches that didn't do too well because so many of them were amazing.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think as far as the female comedians, maybe because they were younger, because again, I'm going to go to the well one more time when I talk about Carol Burnett. Who were we ever exposed to who was female, who was allowed to be funny, right? Who was allowed to make the jokes, who was allowed to deliver the punchlines? I don't know. Was it Carol Channing in a box on the Hollywood Squares, with a pre-written line that she's delivering that's not spontaneous, that's not original, you know what I mean? So, I mean, it was like we got exposed to women.
By the way, quick sidebar. I'm so sorry. Carol Channing, is that a real speech impediment or is that a character? Is she really slurring? I think she always talks like this. Doesn't she always talk like this? Hi, I'm Carol Channing. Can that really be her real voice?
God, I hope not. Can you imagine living with that? Can you imagine that being your wife or your grandmother or your mother? Was that her real hair? Was any of that real?
She was such a sweet lady, but I almost feel like she had a stroke. And then someone said, hey, this doesn't have to be the end of your career. Just go with it, man. Just use that voice. And next thing you know, she's booked on Hollywood Squares and everyone loves hearing Carol Channing's voice. there's no way that was her original voice.
Was anybody on Hollywood Squares a real persona? I mean, probably not. I think they were all exaggerated versions. I hope they were all exaggerated versions of themselves.
Chris, I know we're getting off on a side
We
tangent,
are.
but who was the guy that famously always wore the hat, like the cowboy hat that was sideways on his head?
Charlie Weaver?
Charlie Weaver. What?
Yeah.
Can you help me here? What the F is that guy famous for? I've always wondered.
Charlie Weaver.
I guess I can look it up on the Google machine, but what is his thing?
I don't know. I would guessing he was a version of that character on Sid Caesar or something.
All I could figure by his personas, he was a character actor on F Troop or something, but I've looked. He's not on there. I don't know who that guy is.
I think he's the grandfather of like Rosanna Arquette and Patricia Arquette.
Oh my God. Wow. All right. I can't believe that's possible, but we'll find out. So sorry. I digressed.
That's okay. That's what this show's all about. It's all about digressing. Over time, I think that the thing that, again, the characters that we saw on Saturday Night Live, your Emily Latellas, your Rosanna, Dana, and it was interesting the way some of those kind of stuck out because you'd think the ones that kind of hit, like I'm sure Lorraine Newman or Garrett Morris had character. Garrett Morris had Chico Escuela, right? Baseball, been Betty good to me.
Oh, yeah. Oh, man. Oh, yeah.
Chico Escuela. Okay. Again, it's like, and kind of on the margins when you think about it. I think the competition for the characters probably that came through, there were the nerds, right? That was like Bill Murray when he came on in the second season. And again, I think it was Gilda Radner, Todd and Lisa Loopner, doing all these ridiculous things, that the recurring ones. I think those were the ones that started to stand out. And so then you almost like, there was like an expectation. And you see it today in the 50th season of it, is it like, oh, I hope they do this sketch with this character, right? You kind of, it's like, yes, we got, and I guess the bees, which I guess famously John Belushi hated the bees. I think, again, getting into the ones, and those ones like the Rosanna Dana and Emily Latella, they appeared on what? They appeared on Weekend Update, right? Which in itself was something that was different and irreverent and new and smart, making fun of the news, right? Because we grew up with Walter Cronkite and that sort of thing in the evening news, and news was dead serious, right? And the news was something that was like, man, this is 30 minutes of war and disaster and crime and whatever was happening in the world, especially in 1975. In 1975, when the Saigon fell and the economy was in the toilet and they're still recovering from Watergate. So the news was like really heavy. And instead, yes, as you already referred to, we got Chevy Chase as he's on the phone before Weekend Update starts. And then it was the news, 7 or 8 minutes of making fun of the news, making fun of famous people, making fun of things that were actually kind of, taboo in a sense. We had never seen that before.
Yeah, no. And speaking of Bill Murray, I mean, later on, after he left Saturday Night Live and started making movies and immediately had success with movies and really became, to the world, the actual person, Bill Murray, where now we all get who Bill Murray is, right? It's just this insane. I would say that between Bill Murray and Steve Martin, I think those are my biggest influences during that time. And then later on, my kids were hugely influenced by kind of the smart ass irreverence of Bill Murray. But my point in all of this is the sketches that he was kind of famous for early on, I didn't get. I didn't really think they were that funny. I couldn't relate to it. So for instance, the Lisa Loubner and Todd. Oh, Todd, and the Noogies and Noogie Patrol and all that stuff. For some reason, it just seemed kind of cringy to me as a kid, and I just didn't get the larger joke. And then another one that he did where he was the nightclub singer, the lounge singer, right? And he would sing just awesomely cheesy, over the top versions of songs. Star Wars. Those crazy Star Wars.
Nothing but Star Wars.
Didn't make any sense to me at all. Didn't get it. And so it wasn't until I became an adult, looking back on those sketches, that not only do I now get it, they're gold. I mean, it's just, they are so funny on so many levels, and I love those sketches. But I guess my point is, we were pretty young, like I said, when this first came out. So the early days of Saturday Night Live, they didn't all resonate. I wasn't quite hip enough, I guess.
No, I can relate. It's like, and if, especially if you had older siblings that were laughing and you weren't quite sure why they were laughing. Um, and so, yes, definitely looking back on them becomes like, I get it now. I think Bill Murray was unique in the sense that, like, sometimes I don't know if anybody got it except for him. And it was like, this is funny because he had a specific delivery, right? And you probably understand he had a specific tone, and it was just like, and he was almost kind of the same character in the sketch. And it's like, he was the funny one. He was the cool one. He was the one that was kind of indifferent. And if you don't get this joke, that's on you. Right. It had, and so you could almost, I don't know. And you've been in these situations. We always talk about what are they doing
Right.
in that writer's room, right? I'm sure, I'm guessing Bill Murray wasn't extremely flexible in a writer's room. It was like, no, this is the line, this is the delivery. And that kind of came through. And I think it comes through in most of his character. And I think it's almost a natural segue because as they got into films, you saw these, because you expected this persona of somebody to go and come from Saturday Night Live, and you knew how funny they were, and you knew how irreverent they were, and then does that translate to the screen? Does that translate to a film or a certain character? I think sometimes they just flat out did the same character, whether it was that character by name or it was just, this is who I am, right?
Yeah. I think a great example of that idea, Chris, is if we take Bill Murray's Saturday Night Live to today, to take that trajectory versus a Chevy Chase, right? So Chevy Chase was the biggest breakout star of that first season and thought to himself, F this, show, I'm out of here. And later on, he famously regretted that decision and realized, I should have stuck around a little longer. I definitely left too early and all that stuff. And this is a good example because it's well known that Bill Murray and Chevy Chase literally have had fistfights in the past, right? Behind the scenes. So Chevy Chase did pretty well when he left Saturday Night Live. He had films that did okay. And then he later became famous characters like Clark Griswold and the entire Fletch series. And he was able to bring his weirdness, which is pretty funny. I mean, I got to say, there are some Chevy Chase-isms that are pretty effing funny. One of my favorites was always the one where he would make a face when the person wasn't looking, and then as soon as they look at him, he has a normal face again, right? That, for some reason, was funny. Physical comedy to me, plus all of his just non sequiturs. Good evening, I'm Chevy Chase, and you're not. Just weird little things like that.
The pratfalls, the physical comedy.
It's no surprise, and I'm not saying anything that we don't already know. The world kind of knows that Chevy Chase is a person. He's not easy to get along with, right? And he's kind of famously a dick. And again, I'm only saying what I've seen a million times in interviews and stuff. And I think that has kind of hurt his overall perception with the world, right? As much as we want to think it's the beloved Chevy Chase, he's really kind of a dick. Whereas Bill Murray is kind of like, again, is this too on the, I don't know, a fine wine or whatever, where he just gets better and better with age, and it's just funnier and funnier. And he's just so beloved. The longer you get to know Bill Murray, the more you see his body of work and his confidence in who he is, where now he's almost become this mythical, legendary figure where, Chris, as we both know, he'll just show up to a golf tournament out of the blue and just walk up and hit a putt from, 20 yards and then wave at the crowd and walk off, or just appear at a bar and grab the mic and start doing karaoke, or, I'm not kidding, just appear at someone's wedding. Hey, everybody, and just start mingling with the guests and then disappear. I'm not saying Bill Murray isn't maybe hard to deal with in real life. I don't know Bill Murray, but it's interesting how their careers took, different paths, right? Where, yeah, their persona just becomes either beloved or like, that guy's a dick.
Was it a surprise at all when you heard that that Bill Murray and Chevy Chase got into a fight or multiple fights, it was just like, no, I can see that, right? It's like 100%. It was just like, oh, who would have won? Who got the first punch? How did that go? You could see that 100%. And I think, but they're probably, I think they're probably a good example because sometimes of personalities being too similar. Whereas Chevy Chase kind of comes off as this pompous, arrogant guy that like, yeah, I don't want to hang out with, but yeah, I definitely would go drink in some dive bar with Bill Murray. They probably got a lot of similarities because again, they probably do have their egos, or
Of
probably
course.
they have their egos, and they do have, you know, their idiosyncrasies, and they are, you could be perceived as difficult, but it's just like, you know, you're using similar ingredients, but you have a different, you know, different recipe, and then you have a different result. But let me ask you a question because again, we've already touched on it because the films that kind of, like I said, the characters, the sketches is like, we could make this into a movie. Do you have a favorite film that came out of Saturday Night Live? There wasn't that many, which crazy. If I'd asked you how many you think there were, you think, oh, I don't know, 15, 20. There's something like less than 10. But do you have one that sticks out as like, that came out of Saturday Night Live and is your favorite?
There's only one, and Chris, you're probably going to remind me of others, and I'll say, oh my God, I forgot that was one of them. But the one that is to this day one of my favorite movies, I love every frame of that movie, is The Blues Brothers. And it's interesting too, because musically, I did not like that music as a kid, right? As a young kid, I just didn't relate to it. I just didn't get it. I didn't understand it at all, you know, whatever. So when they performed, you know, Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi as the Blues Brothers on the actual show as the musical guests, I was just like, eh. Later on, as I became, you know, 18, 19, 20 years old, all of a sudden I started to re-listen to that music. Holy shit, I fell in love with it. I'm like, my God, this is the greatest music. And that movie is so silly. It's so ridiculous. It's so left field. It's an absolute just punch you in the face movie. And the car pileups, Chris, how many cars did they destroy in the making of that movie? I can't even tell you.
At the time, it was a record, I believe.
I love that movie so much. And forgive me, Chris, if I have told you this story, but my buddy and I, right out of high school, when I was working at a theater at Grossmont Center here in San Diego, for Halloween, we decided to go to a Halloween party dressed as the Blues Brothers. But get this, Chris, I painted my 1974 Plymouth Valiant to look like an Illinois patrol car. And did I say Illinois? Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Illinois patrol car.
You did say Illinois.
And my buddy Myron was an artist, and so he actually made it look like a black and white. It already looked like the same style car, right down to, Chris, to protect and serve. And it literally said Mount Prospect Police Department on the side of the car. It was so convincing as we're driving to the Halloween party that people were actually stopping and letting us go ahead of them. Cars were slowing down when they saw me behind them, and we're laughing and thinking this is really funny. And I should have known better, because at a four-way stop, some dude says to me in the other car across the way, "Hey, you assholes, you can't do that." What? What's he saying? So, Chris, of course, what happens? Right? We get pulled over by an actual patrol car. The cops get out. They walk up to the side of us. They make us get out of the car. And this is what they do, Chris. They get out, I'm not joking, a Polaroid camera, which I guess, you know, cops would have obviously carried back then, right? Because that way you can take pictures and you get the instant, right? And they have us pose in front of the car, and they take multiple photos of it. Then they have us pose with them and take multiple photos of it. And then they say, hey, you got to go home. You have to wipe off the emblem that says, you know, to protect and serve, and you have to wipe that off. But you can have a black and white car. Ha, 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 this is so funny. We actually followed you for a mile, and we thought you might be an actual cop car. Good job, guys. Then what happens, Chris? A police ambulance pulls up. And Chris, this woman was not having it. And I don't say this woman like because she's a woman, but I will say She was not having it.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, I am very concerned. These guys should be arrested right now and taken in. This is highly illegal. And you can see the other two dudes are like, come on, man. So she insists on writing us a ticket. Chris, the ticket was vehicle resembling law enforcement vehicle. That's what we got hit with. All right. So we go to the party anyway. F it, right? We're not going to listen to them. Honestly, we just went to the party and had a great
Mm-hmm.
time and performed music that night in a little band as the Blues Brothers. And then I had to go to court, right, to defend myself on this ticket. And I'm in a giant room with dozens of other people that are all waiting their turn to be heard in front of the judge, fighting their tickets. And Chris, they
Mm-hmm.
read the ticket in front of everybody. And the judge says, what is this? Vehicle resembling law enforcement vehicle. What? And I'm stand up. And again, you can imagine the crowd in El Cajon, right, on a Tuesday afternoon. For those of you that don't know, El Cajon is basically like, I'm sorry for people that grew up in El Cajon. I apologize, but come on, man, El Cajon. And so you're literally talking about people that are coming in from Lakeside, right? Let me just play some banjo music in the back. I guess that's my point.
Okay. All right. All right.
The hills have eyes. That's all I'm saying, El Cajon. So I said, hey, my friend and I dressed up like the Blues Brothers for Halloween. We painted the car like a cop car. And she stops me and she goes to the bailiff and whispers something. And the bailiff says, John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd. And then she looks and goes, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. And she starts laughing. And then the entire crowd starts laughing, this nervous laughter. And everybody, I think, is kind of rooting for me a little bit, right? All these other people that are sitting there holding their speeding ticket and their traffic violations, they're all kind of like, come on, man, let them off, let them off. And she goes, this is ridiculous. You never should have been, brought in here. Case suspended. Goodbye, go
Mm-hmm.
away. And there was literally in the back 3 or 4 people that clapped. I'm like, oh my God, thank God, this is so awesome. But again, that's how much I love that movie.
We're gonna have to do a whole episode on your predisposition to painting your car,
Right?
because now this is the second time you've told a story like that,
This is the second time. Yeah,
which is 2 more times than most people in the world.
that's true. Yeah.
And as you, it's funny as you're describing this scene, I'm thinking, man, this would have been a great time for Aretha Franklin to show up and start singing. You better think, and the whole courtroom could turn into just like they did the Jailhouse Rock at the end.
Oh, one of my favorite songs from that movie.
My favorite as well. The thing that's crazy about that is they were never in sketches.
Yeah.
They did musical numbers.
Right.
They never were out cracking jokes. They were never at
No.
on Weekend Update. They were never
That's a
in
good
any
point.
sort of like conventional, 4.5-minute, comedic thing with a big punchline.
They never featured the Blues Brothers in any of the skits. Oh, sorry, sketches. Yeah.
But you're absolutely right, 100%. I have a CD of Briefcase Full of Blues, which was, I think, live recorded, I want to say somewhere in Hollywood. It sold 4 million copies. Okay. Which in that day and age, it's a ridiculous amount of sales for a record. But again, 100% the exposure, you look at that movie, people that you and I had never really seen, whether again, it was Aretha Franklin or Cab Calloway, Ray Charles. I eventually became a huge Ray Charles person, saw him 3 or 4 times in concert. 100% it was a great, it was loud and it was crude. And like you said, there was car crashes and Illinois Nazis and all of those different things and all these ridiculous celebrity cameos. And it was just a ton of fun. And I remember again walking out of that movie and saying, what did I just see? I think to me, yes, my favorite by far. I think if you want to look again, and there's like 9 films, but 9 or 10 movies, the Wayne's World movies were actually pretty good. Those were more traditional films, linear sort of storytelling and that sort of thing, as far as if you want to get right down to what was a better film. But absolutely, 100%. I think it's my favorite, and I think now definitely the best that came out.
of course, Wayne's World, and I will say, to the credit of Mike Myers, that was the next round of Saturday Night Live cast members that I
Mm-hmm.
remember going, oh shit, I need to watch this show again. I need to start watching Saturday Night Live again, because once you brought in Dana Carvey and Mike Myers, that was pretty gold, right? I mean, they came up with a lot of great ideas, from the church lady that
Mm-hmm.
never failed to make me laugh. And Wayne's World. Wayne's World was so clever to me at the time that, I mean, I would do anything to not miss the episode. I remember like switching my shift at a hotel when I was doing a job there, just so I could get home on time to watch Wayne's World, or hoping that it was even going to come on, right? Because you had no guarantee that that skit was even going to be on there.
Mm-hmm.
And then I love the movies. God dang it, Sketch. Part 1 and part 2, both those movies are solid and fun. And you can see the inspiration later for Austin Powers, because it's very similar in terms of these crazy non sequiturs and these over the top characters. You know, the one thing I will say is it didn't occur to me, until years later that, I hate to say it, and I'm sure this comparison's been made 1,000 times, it's a direct ripoff of Bill and Ted. Am I wrong? I mean, it's literally the same thing. It is absolutely 100% excellent, right? You've literally got a blonde guy and a
Mm-hmm.
brunette guy
Okay.
that are super into rock and roll, and
Okay.
they're just kind of metalheads. And again, the catchphrase is excellent. So weird. I'm not saying that Michael Myers isn't a creative genius. And of course, you can be inspired by different things. It's not like he ripped off the exact premise of Bill and Ted, but it is funny when you look at it like, dude, aren't those the exact same ideas? Am I wrong?
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. I think I think the characters are a little bit different. I think they fleshed out.
They are.
I think they're not as dumb, right? Because I think the Bill and Ted are just stupid. But again, it's the stupid that makes you just laugh out loud, because I can't believe they're saying that or doing that. Yeah, you can definitely see the line. Rock and roll stupid metalheads who are high school age. I think Bill and Ted looked a little bit closer to actual high school age than Mike Myers and Dana Carvey did.
You think?
But yeah, I think they were smart and they were irreverent and they were funny, and they made the references that, really kind of just drew on like, oh yeah, I remember that, whether it was a Grey Poupon joke or something about Alice Cooper and Aerosmith, those sort of things.
And Chris, I normally don't do this. You know that we don't like to look at the Google during the episode. We like to kind of keep this free form. But I
Okay.
did just do a quick check, and Wayne's World as a sketch appeared for the very first time on Saturday Night Live the day after Bill and Ted's first movie was released. So hard to say, chicken or the egg. I can only assume that trailers were already out there. Again, I'm not accusing Mike Myers or anybody of anything. It could be just simultaneous that they came out together. And to your point, they really are two totally different trajectories on that idea, right? Just because you have two metalhead rock and roll dudes doesn't mean it's the same story, right? And obviously, Mike Myers took it in a whole fucking different direction that was awesome. Interesting, though. I always thought to myself, wait a minute.
But then you could draw a line probably to Fast Times at Ridgemont High and Jeff Spicoli, right? Which was what, 81 or something like that when that film came out, and the book before that. So
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think you
yeah.
can see that. I think those are all the kind of characters I think that we kind of knew. We knew people like that. And I think that's also what Saturday Night Live kind of did, is making fun of people that we knew, archetypes that we knew,
Yeah,
personalities that we knew.
yeah, of course.
So talking about that, so a film, is there a performer or two that stuck out for you? Again, we're on the same page as far as the movies go.
Well, Chris, speaking of performers, I would love to take a quick moment here to reflect on people. These are celebrities, right? Actors
Mm-hmm.
or singers, right? Who appeared on Saturday Night Live as a host. And these would be people that me specifically, I thought, or in one case, oh no. And they not only did amazing on the show, but they became sort of just a mainstay on the show because their comic timing is so impeccable. And who would have guessed? They are so effing innately funny, even if they're not really famous for it initially, right? So here's an example. Years later, right, when you have the Andy Samberg era of SNL, right, where he comes on and he's not getting a lot of stage time, and he decides to pitch Lorne Michaels, hey, can I shoot things outside of SNL on my own dime and then just hand them to you and have you play them? And he was kind of against it, is my understanding, and then decided to go for it. And of course, those Andy Samberg short films and music videos, more specifically, right? Dick in a Box
Mm-hmm.
and Lazy
Lazy
Sunday or whatever it
Sunday.
is.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, just became huge. But along with that whole era came Justin Mother effing Timberlake, a guy who I could not stand. And Chris, I'm putting him on the list, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is a guy that's right up there with all the people that are already on my list of people that
Mm-hmm.
don't deserve my wrath, but I do not like. And it's because I can't relate to his music. If I could relate to his music, there would probably be something wrong with me because he was in a boy band and I'm an adult, right? So you would have to actually ask questions like, Jeff, why are you so into Justin Timberlake? And God damn it, Chris, he is so funny. The guy has such impeccable comedic timing. He's definitely wanting to be self-deprecating. He is fucking awesome. I still hate his music, and I don't mean I dislike it. I mean I actually hate it. It actually makes me upset listening to it. But he's an
Mm-hmm.
amazing musician. We all get that. He's got an amazing voice, and he's very successful. It's horrible music, but I get it. But that is one of those things where, God damn you, Justin, I don't want to like you, but you have my respect. This is absolutely not what I thought. Another example, an actor that I do love, but never thought would be incredibly funny, would be Christopher Walken. But let me ask you, Chris, do you have anybody that you thought, no way, and then they surprised you?
I don't know about the no way part. I think it was I think maybe, um, I think that the ones that kind of stick out in the sense that were somebody like Tom Hanks, who
Oh, yeah,
became almost an extension. Everybody likes Tom Hanks. He's eminently likable these days. So going back, and then again, Steve Martin, because again, we talked about that was our initial exposure. That was a guy that was like, he obviously was friends with the cast members and the writers and everything else, and it just showed. Again, a surprise was probably Ryan Gosling,
great example.
right, who's been on the show several times in the last several years, and the dude is hilarious. And I didn't, and unlike
Absolutely.
you, I like some of his films, and I've never had a distaste for what he produces. And you and your
Ryan Gosling? I never said that I don't like.
no, I'm talking about. I was saying like, unlike you and Justin Timberlake. That's what I was trying to say.
Oh, gotcha. I don't look, Ryan Seacrest, I don't like. Ryan Gosling, okay, I just want to make sure. I love Ryan Gosling.
Ryan O'Neal, you're kind of 50-50 on. Yeah, no, but
You know what? I don't fucking like Ryan O'Neal. He's a complete dick.
he's dead. He's dead. Okay.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. Now I'm in trouble. I'm sorry, but still, we shouldn't speak ill of the dead, but he was a giant dick.
All right. Okay. Let me finish my thought here. I do have one, I think. But I mean, but I think again, but just like I said, I didn't have a disdain like you did for Justin Timberlake and lump him in my Journey and Ryan Seacrest category. But he was just surprising. Like this guy is like into it, and because his films outside of a couple of films, he's not like generally he's a pretty serious actor. Good. And then he kind of let his guard down a little bit with some of the more recent films that he's done. But he kills it on that show. And you can tell he's
Absolutely.
having a great time. And he just brings like an energy and brings that, that sort of, again, it's like, wow, now it's like, oh yeah, I want to watch it because he's on, right? Just like that. Like, where I don't have to like rush home from my job at the Holiday Inn, but I can just sort of like say, oh yeah, I'm going to watch that episode because they're always better.
Well, Chris, even further on a sidetrack here, let's talk about really good-looking actors that are traditionally leading men,
Mm-hmm.
and they do not meet our expectation at all, which is Ryan Gosling. He's such a world's sexiest guy and just really good looking. But you're always surprised, to your point, that he's actually self-deprecating, super funny, has a great sense of humor. I would also put Brad Pitt in that category. Really good comedic timing, super self-deprecating, did a ton of movies that have nothing to do with him being handsome or, the girls liking him. Did all those just insanely awesome movies with Quentin Tarantino. And he's just a legitimately funny guy. And then George Clooney, just when you think, back in his heyday, oh, he's just the leading man. He's just this really good looking dude. No, when he did the movie, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? You finally got to see, or maybe he had already done this before, but I'm just thinking that film was a big breakout film too, where this guy's actually funny. He actually has comedic timing. He actually wants to do projects where he's not this dreamy looking dude. And Ryan Gosling is just one of those guys, just like Justin Timberlake, right? Where they completely change your entire perception. Another one that popped into my head, Chris, that I did not expect to be super funny was Adam Driver. Now, Adam Driver is not your super hunky, good-looking dude. He's a good-looking guy, I guess, in his own right. I'm not trying to bash him, but he definitely doesn't play those roles. But have you seen some of the skits? Oh, God dang it, Chris, I'm never going to be able to say it.
Stop with the skits, man.
Have you seen some of the sketches he's been in? There is one where he comes to school for his son and, bring your dad to work day. And the dad, Adam Driver, his job is to be an oil baron. Chris, an oil baron. And you just have to look it up, you guys. Go to YouTube, type it in, Adam Driver, oil baron. It is one of the funniest skits I've seen in the last 15 years. And again, who would have thought that Adam Driver has that kind of commitment and comedic timing? Again, I go back to Christopher Walken, Alec Baldwin, who traditionally did a little more dramatic stuff and this kind of, again, good-looking dude. His comedic timing, insane when you look at Saturday Night Live and then 30 Rock. These are all people that just completely blow your mind with their ability to take a left turn on your preconceived notion about them.
100%. And also from Saturday Night Live, Adam Driver and the Undercover Boss sketch where he plays Kylo Ren.
Yes.
First of all, the production values, it looks like a Star Wars set.
It does.
The Undercover Boss show, which at the time was like, and I don't know if you'd ever watched that, but I watched it because it's like, yeah, here's the CEO who's going to put on a wig.
I get the premise, yeah.
Right, he's going to put, and I actually, they did it here locally, and we knew some of the people involved because they did tailor-made golf. So that was really unusual to see. So to see the deadpan delivery of the seriousness of Kylo Ren being the undercover boss, and then the joke was that everybody actually knew it was Kylo Ren, and it's hysterical because he plays it completely straight. You're absolutely right. I think Adam Driver is another perfect example of somebody that was secretly funny, because I don't know if he's ever been in a lot of comedic films, right? He's in the Star Wars movies, and he's in some film where he's like with dinosaurs. There are clearly people that ended up getting hosting gigs because they're the hot, they've got some, they've been writing a couple of hot films, and they actually, or TV shows, and they're in the moment, and they're not up for it. Those are some of the painful episodes, and you can see it in the monologue. Like when the monologue is all of a sudden has 2 or 3 people in the, cast members coming in because
they need help. Yeah. They don't have that same comic timing. Yeah, no. Right.
They can't carry a 5 or 6 minute monologue on their own. And I think that's the one thing, if I look at, the one thing that's sort of evolved, they used to use whoever was in the cast to be the president. And the joke was they started doing a little bit initially when they started making fun of like Chevy Chase was Gerald Ford, and they didn't even try, right? I'm Gerald Ford, right? And he would fall down a flight of steps because Gerald Ford was like
clumsy. Yeah.
Right. And then Dan Aykroyd would do like a Nixon thing, a little bit of the mannerisms and everything else. They never really tried to transform somebody physically. I wanted to even say with like when they started doing Trump and Alec Baldwin, he did it once and then he became, the guy. Now they have somebody doing it who's really good.
Yeah, he's amazing. Yeah.
But it was just like, but Alec Baldwin always had to come back to do Trump. And they even did it with the, like, who is Joe Biden and who was, Maya Rudolph just did Kamala Harris. That's kind of a drag. Like, why can't you have somebody from the cast, right? When they were doing, again, during the election, they were bringing in Jim Gaffigan to do, Governor Walz from this. It's like, you can't tell me there's somebody on the cast that couldn't pull that off. So sometimes I think they lean a little too much on getting these outside people in. And that's one of the things that they never would have you watched the show evolve over 50 years. But yeah, those sometimes when somebody comes in and clicks, it's like a bonus episode, the secretly funny guys. And I think Matt Damon is another one I thought is actually pretty funny. And he always does these serious action roles and things like that. Well, Jeff, I think much like a lot of the topics that we discuss here, we just scratched the surface.
Oh, yeah.
Considering their entire podcast, I'm sure you could find a podcast of Saturday Night Live that would break down every episode.
Hope they're there.
Every performer, every musical guest, say it with me now.
Sketch. S-K-E-H. Sketch.
Right. Etch a sketch. Think sketch. Okay. So you could break it down. Every musical guest, every controversy. One of the first, I think, utterances of the F word on TV came from one of the down years of Saturday Night Live. But I think, to me, and again, we talked about it as an influence, and we talked about the things that kind of shaped our sense of humor and shaped our sensibilities. I think I can think of it in one term. One way is like, you and I, as old as we are, we didn't see Ed Sullivan on the Beatles, right? We didn't see Woodstock. We were a few years old. These seminal cultural events, or Elvis, or those kind of things that sort of happened, they historically, So to me, this was something, even though we were not the target audience, and even though we were younger, to me, this was like a rock and roll. This was something that changed. This was something I remember where I was when I saw it. I remember the early parts. Again, we can talk. I remember things that have stood out to me, and things that have influenced me and shaped, and things that I still enjoy, things that I've been disappointed by. And to me, it's like I said, it's a TV show. It's been on for 50 years, okay? Which is insane, absolutely insane. And I'll still watch it. I still have a lot of issues with, sometimes I go, boy, did I just waste a lot of time. You can still be disappointed, just like you could be with anything else in your life. But like I said, it was a rock and roll kind of thing. It was something that kind of we were there for. We witnessed. We grew up with that. And I think that's what's cool about it. And that's why, looking back on it and talking about it and still making references to it in our daily lives, hey, it's kind of cool. It's kind of fun.
Agreed. 100%, Chris.
Until next time.
Until next time.